Hey everybody, this is Jersey Frank. Welcome back to Understanding Music in 30 Minutes Part 2. And we're going to pick up where we left off in the first video. If you haven't seen that first one, I highly recommend that you go back and take a look at that before you jump into what we're about to take a look at here today. We kind of left off, well not kind of, we did leave off looking at how to build chord progressions off of the major scale. We talked about each of those 7 notes of the major scale getting their own chord. Therefore, you have 7 chords to work with in your songwriting. And then choosing out some of those chords, all of those chords, however many you choose to write your own music, and then writing vocal melodies or instrument melodies, melodies for instruments or for voice, or to solo over those chord progressions. And we're going to take a look at a simple way to do that. There are many ways to solo, and we could get more and more complex, from Yankee Doodle Dandy to whistling Yankee Doodle Dandy all the way up to the most complex classical music or jazz music. But what I want to do in these videos, the purpose of them, is to get you to understand the basics, and then you can kind of take it from there. And in future videos, we'll get more complex and take a look at different ways to accomplish some of these same things in more complex ways. But let's start today by talking about that major scale again. We've got 7 notes in the major scale. Let's, for this lesson, take the G major scale. G to G there, 1 octave. If we go up another octave, we can go. That's your do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay? Now, if you take that G major scale and you play from G to G, okay? That's one way to do it. But what if you were to take that same G major scale but start on the 2nd note of it, the A note, and continue playing up to the next A? You're still playing the G major scale, but you're starting on the 2nd note of the G major scale, A. And you can do that from B to B, then from C to C, D to D, and so on through all 7 notes of the major scale. Still playing in the G major scale. In other words, when I'm playing A to A, I'm not playing an A major scale there. Okay, what I'm doing is I'm playing the G major scale starting from its 2nd note. That is the 2nd mode of the G major scale. If I play the G major scale starting from its 3rd note, B, to the next B in the G major scale, starting from its 3rd note, I am playing the 3rd mode of the G major scale. In other words, let's forget the word mode and use the word way. There are 7 ways to play the G major scale. You can play it beginning from its 1st note and then up to its 1st note again, an octave higher. Or you can play it from its 2nd note up to its 2nd note again, an octave higher. And its 3rd note up to its 3rd note again, an octave higher. Those are called the 7 modes or ways to play the major scale. Now, you could play them in other ways, but for this lesson, that's the method we're talking about, okay? Now, what's so important about that? Well, in the way that I want to speak about it today, here's a fantastic way to write melodies or solo over chord progressions. A lot of people think, oh no, we were playing in G and I was playing the G major scale when I was soloing, but then we switched to B minor. Now what do I do? Then they switched to the D chord, the D7 chord. Now what do I do? Well, there are people who would tell you, well, you can play the G major scale over all of that. And that's true. And that's what we're going to focus on today. Since the chords built from the G major scale contain only the notes from the G major scale, all of the notes in the G major scale will sound good over all of those chords. But there are ways to make some notes sound better than others. And that's what I want to focus on today. In other words, let's say we talked about this in the first lesson. I'll rehash it here quickly. We've got 7 notes in the G major scale. Off of those 7 notes, we built 7 chords. Up. Right? Each note got a chord. If we use this, if these chords are going by, in a chord progression, and we just use to solo over all those chords, that will work, but it'll get boring, stale pretty quickly, because you're only playing with these 7 notes. Even if you use a 2-octave scale, it's going to get boring just kind of running up and down the scale over these chords as they're going by. Now you can create great melodies by using just that scale, and we're going to use just this scale to solo over whatever chords go by in your progression. But what we're going to do is this. When you're on the G chord, play the G major scale and focus on the G note, because that's the chord you're on, the G major chord. Say, for example, the progression now switches to the E minor chord, which is the 6th chord in the G major scale. It's the 6th note in the G major scale. G, A, B, C, D, E. And we build an E minor chord. When the progression switches to that chord, continue to play your G major scale, only starting from the E note and playing up to the higher E. You see what I'm saying? If it goes to the A minor, the 2nd note of the G major scale is A, and we get an A minor chord from that. If it switches from the E minor to the A minor, continue to play your G major scale. No changing scales. No changing scales. Let me repeat it. There's no changing scales in this particular method of soloing. What you'll do is, when it goes to the A minor chord, you will continue to play the G major scale, but you will emphasize the A notes. All over the fingerboard. You'll learn to play this G major scale not only in this position, but in 7 positions. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. What if it goes to the D chord, a D7 chord even? What will you do? You will continue to play the G major scale, but you will emphasize the D notes in that scale. Okay? This makes for an easy method of soloing, especially if the chords are going by quickly. For example, let's just... Here's the G chord. G note. I'm playing the notes of the scale, but I'm coming home and I'm emphasizing that G note. Right? Now it switches to D. Right? Let's pretend. Here we go. I continue. When it goes to the D, I go to the D note. And I continue playing that G major scale. And I play all around it. I can play all the notes all the way around it. Continue to phrase with it as I'm soloing. But I'm honing in on that D note. Now it goes to E minor. Right? And I'm still playing the G major scale, but I'm going to emphasize that E note. I play a different scale there, right? So I'm just emphasizing the root note of whatever chord goes by in the progression while playing the G major scale, never changing scales. Now check it out. If I am playing in the key of G and the chord goes to E minor in the progression and I continue to play the G major scale, emphasizing the E note, I'm actually playing an E minor scale. So it's like magic. You went to an E minor chord, but I didn't go to an E minor scale. I did go to an E minor scale, but almost unwittingly, because I stayed in that one G major scale the whole time. Every chord that went by, I stayed in that G major scale. I just emphasized the notes as they went by. Now, once you get that down, and we'll demo a little bit of this in a few minutes. Once you get that down, you can begin to emphasize the other notes in the scale. You don't always have to emphasize the root note. You can emphasize the third, emphasize the fifth, emphasize the seven. You can emphasize any note in the chord. You can even emphasize notes that are not in the chord. They won't sound as home-based, but they'll give it a flavor. They'll give it a coloring, a particular coloring. So here's an example. Here's G. I'm going to start the solo off on a G note, right? What if I start off on the third, which is B? 1, 2, 3. That note is in the chord, in the G major chord, so it's going to sound great. So instead of, what about this? What about the fifth note? That's also in the chord. The fifth note of G major is D. So instead, and so what if we emphasize the D note, right? There's G and D together. So you can emphasize the 3, the 5, the 1. Those are all in the chord. So you're playing G chord, and here are those 3 together. Now here's C. C is the fourth note. You can emphasize any note in the G major scale over any of the chords built off the G major scale at any time. Mix them and match them as you like. But what will sound best are the notes that are actually in the chord. So when I go to the E minor, I want to emphasize E. And I might emphasize the third in that chord, or the fifth. Right? In the case of E minor, that third is going to be flat. That's going to be the G note. What a surprise, we're in the G major scale. So maybe when we go to the E minor chord, I emphasize the G note. So it might sound. That's the E note. Here's the E minor chord. Here's the G note. Right? I might emphasize the fifth when we go to that E minor chord, which is B. So if I'm playing the G major scale, there it is. So maybe as I'm playing over G, now we're about to go to the E minor chord. And I'll go to the B there, emphasizing the fifth. So I'm being repetitive, as I like to do, so that you will say, okay, I got it. That's the point. That's when I know I've done what I'm trying to do. So let's recap right here. Every chord that's built off the major scale, doesn't matter what it is, all 7 chords, you're using it to build chord progressions. If you're doing it in A, if you're doing it in the key of B, if you're doing the key of C, if you're doing the key of E, it doesn't matter. F sharp. You take those 7 chords and play them in whatever pattern you've devised. You can use the single major scale of the key that you're in to solo or write vocal melodies or melodies for instruments using that single major scale. You're going to get the most home bass sounding, ear-pleasing sounds from using the root, the third, and the fifth of whatever chord you're currently playing over as the chords go by. But you never change scales. Okay? So in other words, I'm playing G, I play a G major scale. And then when I go to the D chord, I don't go to a D major scale. When we go to the E minor chord, I don't go to another whole scale I've learned, E minor. When we go to the B minor, I don't play another B minor scale. I'm still staying here in G major. I'm just going to the B note when we go to B. I'm going to the C note when we go to C. I'm going to the D note when we go to D. I'm going to E when we go to E. And I continue in the in-between notes to play the G major scale. Let me give you a demonstration of it here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to play over a progression, a chord progression devised from the G major scale. And we're simply going to play G major. We're going to play B minor. We're going to play D or D7 and then G. So 3 chords. And I'm going to solo just using the notes of the G major scale. I'm going to stay right in this area using the 2-octave scale. And every time a chord goes by or changes, I'm going to emphasize the root note of that chord in the G major scale and keep noodling around in the G major scale, in the in-between notes. Okay? So let's see how that sounds. Hold on while I get this progression going. Okay, so it's G. Emphasizing the G note. Going to B now. Going to D. Back home to G. Let's try it again. Emphasizing the root notes. Here we go, B. Now we can do it again. Hold on. Emphasizing the 3rd in each scale. So instead of emphasizing G, when the G chord is there, perhaps I emphasize the B note. When we go to the B minor chord, I emphasize the 3rd there, which is D. So when we go to the B minor chord, I'm going to emphasize D. Okay? So over the G chord, I emphasize B. Over the B minor chord, I emphasize D. And over that D chord, perhaps I emphasize the 5th, which is A. So let's try that. Okay. Emphasize the B. Go into the B chord. Emphasize D. Go into the D chord. Emphasize A. Let's hear that harmony. Okay, so when we ended on the G, I didn't play a G note. I played a B note, and we got this chord. We got a harmony. So there it is, one of the simple methods of soloing. Now, if you didn't catch something, the great thing about YouTube is you go back and you watch it again as many times as you need to be able to catch it. Now, if we take this G major scale and we start it from its 2nd note and we play the same notes that are contained in the G major scale, only starting from its 2nd note. So let's do that, right? So we've got G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Now let's start from A and keep going up the G major scale, not the A major scale. We'll play A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. So now we've got... Play it up to the A, I'm sorry. Now you say, what is that? That's the G major scale starting from A, playing up to the higher A, but using the notes of the G major scale, not the A major scale. Watch the difference. This is the G major scale starting from A. A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A. You get this pattern and this sound. If I was playing the A major scale, I would get the same as, but I'm not playing the A major scale. I'm going to be repetitive here. I'm playing the G major scale starting from A. I do the same thing from B, right? Now, so far I've got two scales. So if I'm jamming in G, I can use this scale now. Right? So I've got... What if I start it from B? B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Now I've got... I'm going up to B, B to B, sorry. B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B. Now I'm playing a B scale coming out of the G major scale. So I'm still playing G major, I'm just starting from B to B. Now that scale has a name, but who cares at this point? That's not what we're focusing on. If I play the G major scale beginning from every note in the G major scale and going up to that note an octave higher, that gives me 7 scales. I play the G major scale from G to G. I play the G major scale from A to A. I play the G major scale from B to B. I play it from C to C, from D to D, from E to E, from F sharp to F sharp, and back to G to G. That gave me 7 scales that are all 7 different ways of playing the G major scale. I hope that makes sense to you. That's the best way I know how to explain it. That gives me 7 modes of the same scale, right? It's like climbing a ladder, starting from the first rung, then climbing from the second rung, then climbing that same ladder from the third rung, from the fourth rung, but you're never changing ladders. So we're never changing scales. We're just starting it from different places. That's it. And that's giving us 7 modes. So what does that do for me? It does a couple things. If I'm playing over just a straight G chord, say a G vamp or a bass player's playing a G riff, and I want to solo over that, I'm not stuck right here in one box. I can play all of those 7 modes over that lick. So now it frees me up to play all over the fingerboard. I'm just playing the G major scale. Now you could say, well, technically, Frank, when you're on the when you're on an A minor chord and you're changing to an A minor chord in a G major progression, you're playing some sort of A minor scale there. Yeah, that's true, but why confuse me with a particular, a Dorian? That's the name of that particular mode. You're playing a Dorian mode there. When you go here, you're playing a Phrygian mode. And when you go here, you're playing a Mixolydian mode. Instead of, if I'm going to D in the G major chord progression, and I'm playing D to D in the G major scale, well, technically that's a Mixolydian mode. But why not just say you're playing the G major scale starting from D and ending on D? Because that's exactly what you're doing. It just makes it easier in my mind. So that's how you do it. That's one way to do it. That's an easy way to do it in the beginning. Okay? So now you've got 7 different ways to play that G major scale all up and down the fingerboard, freeing you up to do what we talked about. As the chord changes go by in the chord progression, emphasize the root, 3rd, or 5th notes of those chords as they go by, staying with the same scale. Okay? Now, if we're playing in G major and the chord switches to B minor, you've got a couple of choices. You can stay here and continue to play that G major scale, emphasizing the B notes. Staying right in this kind of box. Or you can go up to the B note and play the G major scale starting from there. And play it over a couple of octaves. So you can do that. You can stay here. You can move it up higher. You can even play any of the other modes over that B minor chord. You can play the G major scale starting from A over that, and that'll give you a particular sound. You can play the G major scale starting from C over that B minor chord, and that'll give you a particular sound. Let's try that. Hold on a second. I'm going to use my looper pedal here, and I'm just going to play, let's see, a B minor chord. Just to make the point, that's a B minor chord. Now we can play the G major scale starting from the B and emphasizing B, right? But what if I play the G major scale emphasizing the D note? Let's try it. I played out there a little bit on purpose. Now you can play notes that are not even in the scale. So that makes the point, okay? So take that knowledge and mess around with it, create melodies, create solos, and have fun. I want to mention my book, Thoughts from a Guitar Player by Jersey Frank. In this book, I talk about all this stuff. I go into greater detail. I talk about some of my favorite players, why they're my favorite players, their particular techniques. I talk about I made a couple of albums. I talk about recording in the studio and how we go about that process. Literally from step one to writing the song to actually finishing it and getting it up on social media and Spotify and Tidal and iTunes and so forth and so on. I talk about buying guitars, custom guitars, what the difference is between custom guitars and off-the-rack guitars. I talk about performing live, lots of funny stories in here. There are guitar jokes. There are how my wife reacts to my guitar playing, all kinds of interesting facts. There are people's testimonies in here as to why they play guitar, how they started playing, and why they love it so much. You can get this on Amazon.com if you're interested. Thoughts from a Guitar Player by Jersey Frank. I can't thank you guys enough for taking time out of your busy day schedule to watch videos from a guy like me. I hope they help you in some way. Appreciate it. I'll see you next time.